What's up, yins? Dumpster on Wheels here. If you like bikes and you like videos, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Today I'm going to be going over some creaking that I have on my Giant XTC mountain bike. It's carbon frame, and I'm going to be sorting those issues out. You may have heard some creaking in the last video, so today we're going to be fixing that. So this is our test subject today. This is my 2017 Giant XTC carbon. This was originally a single speed model, and I do have gears on it currently, but it's a nice frame because you can slide the rear axle. It's got like a track style dropout, and then you can run it single speed if you want. So we'll probably do a video on doing that as soon as I switch back to single speed. But for the time being, we're just addressing some creaking that's going on, and I think it's mostly due to the invasion of dirt in the seat tube. So I'll kind of show you some tricks about how I keep dirt out of there. It's been a while since I've maintenance this. So we're going to clean the seat tube out, grease that, put some carbon paste in, and then we're going to also address the bottom bracket. We're going to pull the crank off and grease up the spindle, make sure everything's nice and smooth in there, and hopefully we have a creak for your bike. Alright, so the first thing we're going to address here is the crank. So we're going to pull the crank off and we're going to grease everything up. But before we do that, we're going to make sure the bike is in the lowest gear. This is SRAM. It does have a nice lock. Two different nuts in here. One is for preload, the other one, the internal one, the innermost one, 8mm, and that's the one that we're going to loosen up. So we're going to just hold this crank arm in place, and this is going to come off with regular thread, and then it gets tight again. And when it gets tight like that, you want to just keep going. It's actually pulling, it's self-extracting, so it's pulling itself off of the spindle right now until our crank arm is off. And this is always a great opportunity to clean these up, so we will do that as well. We'll pull out the seal, and I will put that with that crank arm. Easily enough, your crank should just slide right out. All right, so you can see we had our non-drive side crank arm here and the seal that goes with it. And then on the drive side, you can see the seal actually came off with it. And there is a spacer in this case. This will vary based on your frame size, the width of your bottom bracket shell, but there is a spacer here in my case. And then with these SRAM cranks, there's also a wave washer that's built up. And this is why we're pulling this off. This is just routine maintenance. Now there are two different, well, I should say not just two, but there are some different reasons why your bottom bracket could be creaking. One of which could be with particular bottom bracket designs. Some are worse than others, but sometimes the creaking can actually be the outside of the bearing race on your frame, and obviously that's not great. You need to address that. But I know from experience in my case, this is just the spindle having dirt in it, a little bit of maybe corrosion starting from the last wash, stuff like that. So all we're going to do is we're going to clean this up, and we're going to re-grease it, and we're going to put it back together, and it's going to sound like a nice smooth drivetrain should. When it comes to cleaning bike parts, just for cosmetic cleaning, this is my go-to. Now, when using WD-40, like I said, for cosmetic cleaning, I do try to avoid bearings, things like that, because it's just going to eat the grease right out of them. So I'm going to avoid getting it into the pedal spindle so that we don't eat away any lubrication and actual grease that we have in there. But spend enough time with WD-40, you can really get stuff looking pretty nice. Get it looking slick. This is just gonna get dirty again, so I think this is good for now. We'll just set that aside. So at this point, I've got everything cleaned up as far as the crank goes. Now I'm going to start greasing everything together. So I'm just using some Bel-Ray waterproof grease here. And you do want to, one of the most important things is you do want to make sure that you have grease in these splines. This is where a lot of your creaking will come from. So the next thing is I like to re-grease these seals, and once we have that nice and clean, I'll even grab a dab more just to get a nice seal to really keep any water, dirt, gunk out of here. And I'll just apply this seal. So we've already got our spacer on and our wave washer, and we'll throw that in. Apply a liberal amount of grease to the back of this seal here, and we'll apply that. It's a clean rag, and I'm going to just kind of go in where the threads are and make sure that I don't have any grease in my threads. So again, we want to have grease on the spindle and the spindle notches, but not on the inside of your threads. I'm just going to apply a little pressure so that the face of this is flat while I turn my screw and get that started by hand, and we're on. And now I can kind of just ratchet everything, bring everything together now. Look at the torque value here. So the outside 10mm nut is 12 to 15 Newton meters, and the 8mm nut, which is the one that we're working on, is 48 to 54 Newton meters. Okay, so we've got our torque wrench here, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to try to bring these two together. So I'm going to hold that crank while I come up on this. I'm going to continue to do that until we reach our specified torque, and then we'll back off the torque when you store your torque wrench, and our crank is done. Alright, and for this next piece, we're going to grab a 4mm, and I can already hear it's all kinds of grindy in here. We'll pull our seat post out. Alright, so this is the infamous Giant seat post wedge, and it's not a bad system, but when I eliminate any creaks, I want to service this, and this is how I do it. So I disassemble it. I'm going to use regular grease between the pieces, so this face to this face, this face to this face. That's the only place I'm going to use just a small amount of regular grease. Otherwise, I'm going to use a carbon paste, since I'm mating this particularly with a carbon frame. Just do my best to clean out the seat post here. I may even get a little shop air out, and I'm going to just apply just a little bit of carbon paste to my seat tube, or my seat post rather. Don't really need a lot of this. And I'm just going to put just a light amount on these faces here where the seat wedge mates together there. So we're Making sure that we don't use regular grease on any other part of it, as that's just going to cause slippage. Just going to apply just a slight amount on the outside of this, just so we have a nice carbon mate with the seat post. And now I have dropped this down in there before, and it's kind of awkward, so I'm gonna put this back in together, and you can hear all kinds of grinding. It sounds like dirt, but that's just the carbon paste. And I'm just gonna snug this up until I know where I'm at. So I've got a little bit of tightening to do here. Make sure I get a good bite on there. And if you're wondering about torque on this, it does have a value. However, it's incredibly hard to find a tool that will fit in here and allow you. You'd have to use a, I think they call it a claw or a U. So I'm pretty happy with the torque on this. Not gonna go too crazy, but I do want to make sure that it's tight. And I feel pretty good about that. Okay, and then the last thing I like to do is to keep dirt from protruding, like getting in between the seat post and the seat tube. I like to actually seal it off with some good old electrical tape. So I try to cover up everything, but I'm just gonna bring this around with some extra. And as I bring this around, I'm just kind of splitting the two in half. And you can see we've got a nice seal. I'll cut this so that I can fix this up here in a little bit. And I'll just kind of trim this. And I'll try to keep it out of this bolt hole as much as possible so that I can keep the rubber seal on top. But I like electrical tape because it stretches and you can get a nice seal. Okay, and I'm pretty happy with that. And then by the time that I slide the seal back down and get that in place, I think it ends up working pretty well. And it's pretty stealthy. It's not major cosmetic destruction. Fresh chain lube. We're ready to hit the trails. We got the bike freshened up, no more creaks. Got the chain lube. Just actually serviced the fork recently, and we're good to go. So if you guys enjoyed this kind of thing, it's kind of vlog style, be sure to like or comment down below and hit me up if you got any questions. Thanks.